What is going on, guys? Nathan here with a Payday 2 video. In this video, I would like to review the 4 main weapons that were introduced into the game with the release of the Gage Assault Pack DLC. This DLC is $5 over on Steam if you guys want to go pick it up. And overall, I would say that this DLC is fairly average. It's not really a must-have like the Sniper DLC and the Courier Mod DLC. It's just kind of a fun DLC to pick up and play with because of the weapons that were introduced. Now, I'm not going to be reviewing the weapons that were introduced, such as the melee weapons, stuff like the achievements or the masks, because I don't feel that they're very relevant to the game. Meleeing in itself is a little bit gimmicky, in my opinion, so I figured that I would just review the 4 weapons that actually make a difference in the game, those being the 3 assault rifles and the grenade launcher. Now, before I start reviewing these weapons, I figured that I would give a little bit of a disclaimer and say that with the exception of the grenade launcher, I will be reviewing these weapons in comparison to their peers, aka other assault rifles, because in Payday, it's generally known / accepted that sniper rifles are basically the best weapons in the game. It's just that you can't beat the fact that sniper rifles can one-shot cops and also can shoot through shields. I find sniper rifles to be best in any situation that I might encounter, whether it be close quarters, ranged, or medium range. So I will be reviewing these weapons in comparison to other assault rifles, with the exception of the grenade launcher, which is a different type of weapon. So first of all, we have the Gecko, 7.62 caliber, I think is the caliber that they list after the name. I'm going to be calling this weapon the Gecko because it's simple. And this weapon is basically the Galil from Black Ops, if you guys remember that weapon model. It just has a higher resolution texture, but behaves actually the same way. I think this is a very solid assault weapon because it has very good damage for how stable it is. This weapon has very minimal recoil, and even the recoil it has is not visually impairing and very controllable. So I think these two factors put together make it just a very good weapon. It can typically tear through targets pretty well because you're able to keep the reticle of the weapon on the target for an extended period of time. If you end up firing on full auto or even with bursts, it tends to just take out cops pretty fast. I do like the iron sights on the weapon. I feel like even though Payday has a lot of optics available to put on your gun, it's just kind of nice to have iron sights if you happen to be short on optics, or perhaps your favorite optic is, out of stock. You just need to keep getting more courier packages to unlock more of that optic. But it's nice to have nice clear iron sights that aren't discomforting and don't clog up the screen. And in fact, for this iron sight in particular, this is more, I think, of a personal experience, but this iron sight almost made me funnel my shots better, it seemed like, because the iron sight is designed in a way where you can only really see your target, and that's it in the entire iron sight. So it tends to isolate the target that you're firing at, meaning that I can funnel a lot more shots into that target because I know that what I'm looking at is just what I need to pay attention in the little circle. So I'm not sure if that made sense, but I think it was just more of a personal experience that I was able to aim better with this iron sight. Also, this weapon does have decent starting ammo and a decent pickup rate for ammo that you find on the ground. I believe I started off with something like between 150 and 165 ammo. I'm not entirely sure, don't quote me on that, and I'm too lazy to look up the actual numbers, but I found that you can have a lot of endurance with this weapon. You can generally pick up a lot of ammo from the ground, and you don't need to get ammo from an ammo bag too often. So overall, I would say this is definitely an above average assault rifle. I would even put it in the top 3 assault rifles in the entire game. But remember that you cannot beat a sniper rifle when it comes to tearing through cops, although this weapon does a very good job of it. Next weapon we have here is the Guer, some sort of caliber after that name, not entirely sure, but this weapon is basically the G3 from Call of Duty 4, if you guys remember that weapon model. It looks very similar, once again, just with a sort of higher resolution texture than that old 2007 game. So, I was not impressed with this weapon at all. In fact, I think that the reason I was not impressed is because it has too much visual recoil for the damage that it can output. It seems to me that even though this weapon does have very clear iron sights, I do like the iron sights of this weapon as well, I can't seem to keep the reticle on the target for very long, even when I fire in bursts, because this weapon has too many stability problems for the damage that it can output. There are weapons where it works to have a high damage output and you kind of balance that with increased stability. It's just that the visual recoil for this weapon was too much for me. Personally, I wasn't able to keep the reticle on target for very long. And in addition to that, this weapon only has a 35 clip size if you have the magazine perk in the, I believe it's the Enforcer tree maxed out, and it does not start with a lot of ammo for your carrying capacity. I think the number was something like 90, and I even have increased ammo carrying capacity off the start, so that's even less without that perk, which is pretty crazy. So this weapon is really bad. It's average, if not a little bit below average in comparison to all of the other assault rifles in the game. Third weapon we have here is the Famas. Like I said before, I'm not entirely sure if that's the name of the weapon in-game, but I'm going to call it that because it is basically the Famas from every other video game ever. And this weapon has decent damage, but it has a very high rate of fire. It has a 1,000 rate of fire, which is pretty high for an assault rifle. So if you combine the decent damage with the high rate of fire, this weapon tends to rip through people very efficiently. The bad thing about it is that it has absolute crap stability. The recoil, honestly, on this weapon is incredible. Like, if you fire it on fully automatic, the reticle will just climb your screen. It will climb that Mount Everest in the span of like 2 seconds, and that is just an example of how bad the stability is on this weapon. But if you can do a good job of controlling your recoil, you can't really be precise with this weapon, obviously, but you can make it work, and as long as you keep ripping through people, I guess, that will work. I would say that this does have decent ammo capacity and a decent magazine size with my maxed out magazine capacity perk. I have a 45 magazine size, which is nice because the thing does go through bullets very fast, so you almost kind of need to have that perk. And I believe I started off with 188 rounds for my actual ammo carrying capacity, which is pretty good. Like, I think that's almost top of the line in terms of how much ammo you can start with for assault rifles. Overall, I would say this is an above average assault rifle. It's not the best in the game, though. Not perhaps top 5, definitely not top 3. But it's really fun to play with because it has just a high rate of fire, and if you just go fully automatic on a bulldozer, it's really fun to see how his health shreds, especially with Hawk's HUD, where you can see the exact amount of health that the bulldozer has. And last but possibly least, we have the grenade launcher, which I think was the weapon that the most people were excited about for this entire DLC patch. I wanted to be impressed by this weapon, but I was not at all. The grenade launcher seems like a very gimmicky weapon. It's not too useful simply because you only spawn with 6 grenades, I want to say. With my increased ammo capacity perk, I started with 8, which is still ridiculously low, and it seemed as if I wasn't even using the weapon for fear that I needed to conserve ammo from it. It felt like I should only use the grenade launcher when I find large groups of cops clustered together. Otherwise, I would just be using my secondary, so in most cases the revolver, because in my opinion it's the best secondary. But this weapon is just not useful at all. And I feel like if you want to nerf your primary weapon, you might as well just bring a saw for whatever mission you're on, because a saw can expedite most missions out there. So if you're somebody who wants to use their secondary a lot, you might as well just bring a saw and be more useful to your team. I saw actually on a YouTube video that was reviewing the Gage Assault Pack that they said it would be useful for at least one member of your squad to be carrying a grenade launcher, and I could maybe see how that would be logical, except for the occasions where a grenade launcher would, the occasions where I would be more happy to have a grenade launcher in my hand than my favorite primary, such as the rattlesnake, for example, would be few and far between. Situations like that would most likely be isolated to when I need to clear a room and there happens to be a lot of enemies. Most of the situations, though, with the grenade launcher, I would just rather have an actual primary weapon instead of this gimmicky sort of weapon that can only be fired 6 to 8 times before you need to go get ammo again. So, if anything, I would say that this weapon needs more base ammo, possibly 10 to 15, and possibly increased reload speed as well so it can match the damage output that is possible by other assault rifles or sniper rifles. And those two in combination, I think, are the main reason why it isn't really viable in most missions. To its credit, the grenade launcher is pretty fun to play with. It causes a huge explosion, which makes people go flying, which grenades also have that capability, which I thought I might mention as well. It's just that the grenade launcher happens to do more damage. So overall, you really shouldn't be using this weapon, other than for the fun factor. But that was my review of the 4 main weapons that were introduced into the Gage Assault Pack DLC, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I think here is where I'll wrap it up. So, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, that is always appreciated, and if you enjoy my content, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you all later.